So I was really curious, what steps can MSPs take early on to avoid getting trapped in this trend of bloated security stack, especially those that are just starting to scale, those newer MSPs?
I think you've got to manage to a security framework. I think take the time to understand what you're going to use right out of the gate and have some process for it. Don't just go start selling things because you're making money. If you let the money drive your decision making, you've got your priorities in the wrong place. So whether you're a small MSP or whether you're whether you're just starting out, you've got to have that process in place and start to build that culture in your own organization. How am I going to have these conversations with my client? How am I going to tie it back to the things that they actually want? And how am I going to teach them what good looks like? What is, we go through this process in every single one of our sales discovery calls where we evaluate verbally, we let the clients self-evaluate themselves against a set of best practices and standards. We call it our cyber score assessment. And it allows them to, we always say the whole purpose of the cyber score assessment is to help a prospect or a client uncover pain that they were unaware they had. And when you go through that process, it helps not only them to understand where they are weak potentially, but it also helps them to understand how you look at it and evaluate it. And most of the time when I do this, the reactions I get from people are, wow, we didn't know that. Our MSP didn't tell us that. We don't have those types of conversations. We had no idea. And so you've got to have some way to drive that process forward. And it's a process and a culture that you build so that you can do these things consistently over and over and over again.
That's really fascinating. So you developed what you call a cyber score assessment that helps to identify pain points in your new and current clients.
Exactly. Yep.
What kind of questions are, if I can ask, like what kind of questions are in that? Like, what's the focus of it?
Yeah, sure. So we have different versions of them. It depends on if it's a fully managed client, if it's a co-managed client, if it's a healthcare client, if it's a virtual CISO client. So different approaches and a different set of questions based upon the type of client or what services they're potentially looking for. But we touch on areas like general infrastructure. We touch on cybersecurity. We touch on backup and DR. We touch on compliance. We touch on overall IT strategy. And so the way that it works is we ask them these questions around like, how confident are you that you have the right tools and processes in place to protect your organization from a ransomware attack? And then, if they don't know or they don't know how to answer that, we have guidance that we can provide them and say, well, what we're really looking for here from a best practice is X, Y, Z. And that helps to clarify whether or not they're on track with that type of a guy, that type of a question. And then they evaluate themselves. They just give themselves a score. And we're able to tally that score up and then ask them questions after the fact. Were you surprised by it? Was there anything that caught you off guard? Anything that you didn't know? And it's really helpful to go through and do that discovery and shine the light on things that they were unaware about. I work in healthcare, so to bring up the analogy, I say, why do you go to the doctor every year? You do it to get your blood checked, your vitals checked. If there are certain things that your general practitioner is concerned about, they send you off to a specialist. That specialist can then do other diagnostic tests, uncover things that maybe you weren't aware of. Now, you might have woken up feeling just fine today. You might have, oh, yeah, I feel good. There's no problems. But how do you know that you don't have a terminal illness? How do you know that you don't have some sort of a health marker that you could start proactively getting in front of now before it becomes a really serious problem later? So we're used to proactive care when it comes to your health. We're just not used to proactive care when it comes to technology and security.
I love the way you frame that. It's funny because in my current role, I was actually also given the analogy of as a salesperson, you want to think like a physician. You're there to identify their pain and see what it is. But you came up with this assessment thing, which I think is something I've never heard of an MSP really formalize in that kind of way, especially since you have ones for different kind of offerings, different, whether it's vCISO, managed services, etc. I think that's really, you're onto something there that I think is really unique and could help a lot of MSPs because I feel like it's so easy as IT people to say, hey, I have this shiny thing here. I also have this shiny thing. You want that too? But instead, you kind of like a doctor, you went in and had this assessment and came out with a self-reported assessment of it, and then they have their score they can sit and consider how they want to move forward.